Hey guys, I'm going to give a demo for Buto. Buto is my volumetric fog rendering asset. It allows you to render volumetric fog in your project really easily. I'm just going to tab through some of the different scenes that we have set up here. So you can see the volumetric fog is rendering in a variety of different contexts. This one's using light cookies. This one's like set over super long range. This one's in orthographic perspective. And so it's quite a varied and powerful asset that allows you to have a lot of variety and add a lot of depth to your scene. So I'm going to jump back to the general demo. When you import this asset to your project, it'll come into the packages folder. So it's a UPM style package. It comes with a changelog license and package, as well as a README. The README is pretty extensive, includes a lot of information about how to use the asset and all that stuff, quick start guide, things like that. And it also includes a link to the manual, which I have on my website, and you can view that manual here. And I have information about different features of that asset on that manual. You can click through and read all these different features if you're interested. So for a quick start, I'm just going to create a new demo scene. And you can see that the scene is sort of just completely empty. We're going to add some objects in here just so you can see how the scene looks when you have some objects in there. And we're going to go ahead and add a plane as well. And then the way that you add Buto to a scene is by going to volume, global volume. You can also use local volumes, and then you can add that volume to your scene. Now, when you have Buto in your project, you'll see the Oka software volume override. You'll click on that and then click Buto, and then click mode on. So now Buto is technically enabled in the project, but you can see that you can't really see anything happening here. So one thing that you'll need to do is make sure that you enable post-processing on your camera as well, so that you can see Buto in your project. Buto also includes some settings, like if you disable fog in your scene view, Buto will be hidden, so things like that. And if you go into wireframe mode, it'll also be hidden. So it works super sort of naturally with Unity's different settings, but just keep that in mind since a lot of assets don't do that. Now, we're going to go ahead and move these objects around, and you can see that they're automatically casting shadows in the scene, but it's pretty low res, so maybe we're going to bump up the shadow distance here. Yeah, cool. So you can see those shadows are being cast, and if you look closely, you can see that there are volumetric shadows. So it's kind of faint, but that's because these objects are a little bit small. But if we bump up the size, it becomes a lot more apparent, and you can really see it on this plane object. So that's a quick start. Buto's up and running in your scene. If you want to configure it, you can configure it from this volume options. If you want, you can set up multiple different volumes and then move in and out of them. And as you do so, Buto will change. I'll show an example of that a little later on. Now, at a high level, Buto is made up of a set of different sort of sections. So you have your ray march options, the fog characteristics, the fog geometry, how we actually render the noise itself, the fog, the source of the fog 3D volumetric noise. You have some color overrides, directional lighting overrides. You can enable or disable distant fog. We also have temporal anti-aliasing built into the asset. There's also intensity overrides that can override the default intensity of the fog in light and shadowed areas. And there are some advanced settings as well relating to self-shadowing, horizon shadowing, animating the sample position, and so on. So I'm not going to go into too much detail on each of these different individual settings just now, but just be aware that this is how you configure it. And generally speaking, you'll spend most of sort of the early look section in the ray march characteristics, geometry, noise rendering, and volume noise source sections. And then getting things to look just right, you might dip into the color overrides and directional lighting. And then distant fog is sort of just a setting that you can use to enable or disable distant fog. It has its own set of properties. And generally speaking, you'll want to enable temporal anti-aliasing. It makes the scene look a lot better and a lot more smooth and consistent. But just be aware that by default, it's disabled when you add it to your project. So there are two other main things that you'll want to understand with Buto. So you need to understand how it works with additional lights. You'll need to understand fog volumes. So we'll start by jumping into fog volumes. You add a fog volume to the scene by going to rendering and then click Buto fog density mask. Um, there are two different shapes available for the density mask and two different modes. So the shape that we have here is a sphere, but we're going to change it to a box. And the current mode is multiplicative, but we're going to change it to exclusive. You can see when we did that, the fog disappeared. Well, it looks like it disappeared, but it actually didn't. In fact, it's actually just being contained to the space within this box. So you can see if we move the box around, the fog stays within the boundaries of that box. So if we go here, you can see that it's pretty faint because the fog is not very, how would you say, not very dense. If you want, you can increase the fog density. And now you can really see that fog becoming super apparent. When we enable the game, you'll see that the fog kind of just looks like that, but you can enable temporal anti-aliasing to help smooth it out a little bit. So now that we have our now that we have our fog density mask enabled in the project, we might want to also add some additional lights. So when you add an additional light, you need to make sure that that it has the Buto light component on it. This helps to make sure that the light data gets added to the GPU. So this one's super big, and the intensity is quite small. So we're going to go ahead and ramp that up, and we'll tint it a particular color, and we're going to move it somewhere so you can really see the effect on a little bit smaller scale. Something like that. So there's a red light, and then if we bring this one over here, you can make like a yellow light, for example. So those are over here. Maybe I'll just go ahead and move them so that it's facing the camera so you can see it a little bit more easily, like that. So that's how you use lights. It supports point lights and it also supports spotlights. So you can see here that the spotlight inner outer angle is pretty narrow. It's for the green one, but if we broaden it up a little bit, you can see it a little better. And then again, just make sure that you're using temporal anti-aliasing so that the fog is quite smoothed out. So here it's disabled, and then you enable it. So that's the additional lights. There's also an alternative fog density mask mode, so I'll show that now. When you add the fog density mask, you can use the multiplicative mode. This allows you to add or erode volumetric fog from a particular region of the scene. So we're going to want to erode it, and then we're going to make it bigger. So you can see here that I've carved out, maybe I'll show it from a different point of view. You can see I've sort of carved out this spherical section of the fog using the fog density mask. You can control the blend distance, and you can control the scale using the scale tool. So it's super cool. Like if this were your character and the fog density mask were a child of it, as he walks through the fog, it erodes around him. So pretty interesting, cool feature. So it's density masks, lights, and yeah, we'll just take another look. Oh yeah, one other thing that I forgot to mention is you need to make sure that you add the Buto renderer feature to your universal renderer data. So you just go here, click add renderer feature, and then click Buto. If it's not on there, it won't work. So make sure you do that, and you can choose the render pass event as well. Typically, I recommend doing it before rendering transparents, but you can do whatever you want. What else? So yeah, that's pretty much it. you might have a camera in your scene where you want Buto to not render on. So if that's the case, you will want to go here and then click disable Buto rendering, and that will prevent this camera from rendering Buto. This is really good if you have um, like a camera that's like rendering a map or something like that. So that adds some flexibility there. Um, and yeah, I promised I'd talk about the local volumes. So I'm gonna go ahead and create a sphere volume in the scene. Let's see if we can find that one. And I'm gonna make it a little bigger. And then I'm gonna create a new volume profile, and I'm going to add Buto to it and set it to off. So when we go inside of this volume, it disables Buto. So as you can see, Buto works with the volume framework system. And if you go ahead and do something like enable distant fog, when you go in here, you can see that the distant fog turns on. So just a quick highlight of how to use it with sphere volumes. I think that's all the major features right now. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below or join the Discord, and I'll be happy to help. Thanks for watching.